Hi, welcome to the Mohua show. My name is Mohua Chinappa and I am an author, entrepreneur and ex-housewife. This podcast is about everything from business to technology to arts to lifestyle, but done and spoken ईमानदारी से. Hi, in today's episode, we have with us Quasar Thakore Padamsee. Quasar is a true theatre aficionado and a force to be reckoned with in the Indian theatre scene. As the artistic director of QTP Entertainment Private Limited, he has directed and produced over 25 productions since 1999, showcasing his versatility and passion for the craft. Not only is he a visionary theatre director, but he's also a trailblazer in the world of youth theatre as the founder of Thespo, a youth theatre movement. His most recent productions include Every Brilliant Thing, A Peasant of El Salvador, Khatija Bai of Kamali Terrace, and Project Strip. Each of these productions has received critical acclaim and has left a lasting impression on audiences. Quasar's passion for theatre extends beyond the stage as well. He's currently serving on the committee of Tata Literature Live, the Mumbai Lit Fest. And when he's not in the rehearsal room, you can often find him on the cricket field, showcasing his love for sports as well. With his wealth of experience and passion for theatre, he continues to push the boundaries and inspire audiences with his work. Without further ado, let's welcome Quasar in today's podcast. Quasar, how did you fall in love with theatre? Obviously, with both your parents. It is only natural that you would have been exposed to a lot of theatre, but just take our listeners back into that journey of that first play that you remember and that left a lasting imprint in your mind.
Actually, it's the opposite. It's almost because of my parents, I didn't want to be part of the theatre. Basically, my mum was a theatre reviewer and she used to drag me as a child because we couldn't afford a babysitter back then. And she used to drag me as a child to anything and everything that she was viewing. So a couple of things I learned. One was to sit quietly in the dark and, not make too much of a racket. But I really didn't like going to the theatre because I was going to, it's only much later on did those experiences have value. But at the time, I really quite detested it. And then, when you're in school, I was in boarding school in a place called Rishi Valley, and you're doing the odd, class play and school play and, something, and most of it is Panchatantra or, some fairy tale or something, and it's all fine. And then in my 10th standard, I was working on a play directed by a student actually called Vrinda Kondilak. And the play was actually called The Glass Menagerie. And it was the first proper play I'd ever worked on, it was really, it's only 4 characters, it was quite intense. And somewhere in the middle of our second performance, we only used to have 2 performances in those days. And somewhere in the middle of our second performance, in the end of the closing monologue, the closing soliloquy, I paused, for dramatic effect. And I felt the audience pause with me. And I remember that very clearly because I remember thinking at that time, oh my God, this is the coolest feeling in the world. And no matter what I do, I want to keep feeling like this. And at that moment in my head, I was thinking, no matter what else I do, I want theatre to always be part of my life. Terrible thing for an actor to do and an actor to think about and say at that time. But yeah, that was the moment. Yeah, I was 15 years old. I was standing on stage in a little boarding school in the middle of Andhra Pradesh, and yeah, this moment happened. And from then on, no matter what I've done, even when I was working or in college or anything, I've always wanted to have the theatre as part of my life. And in fact, I started off as an advertising professional with, trying to do theatre on the side. And because work was not letting me do theatre, I finally decided, okay, hey, let's, quit this and let's just try and dive full length into theatre and see what happens. So yeah, I mean, that's really my relationship with the form.
So Quasar, मेरे ख्याल से बहुत सारे सुनने वाले हैं अभी जो बहुत शायद घबराते होंगे, to get into theatre because theatre as, a profession is not very easy. We all know that, to get the funds flowing and to get the entire production going, इतना तो आसान होता नहीं है जैसा हमें लगता है कि स्टेज पे एक्टर खड़ा है और वो अपने लाइंस बोल रहे हैं एंड दिस एंटायर क्वासर यूरेका मोमेंट मैं बोलूंगी But how do you approach the process of creating a new production?
I don't think there's one fixed way of working in that sense. Different people work differently. Usually when I'm working on a play or thinking about something, it has to resonate with me. I mean, I work for a company called QTP, and we have a very clear idea, which is one is this a story that needs to be told? And can we tell it interestingly? And those are the two, basically, the longitude and latitude that we use as our x-axis, y-axis that we use how to determine anything that we want to do. And it invariably starts with finding a text or finding an idea and then working with a writer to develop a text, either way. The thing is that you have to be excited about it. At the end of the day, if you're working on a play, at the very least, you're working on it for about 3 months before it opens. And at the very most, almost, it could be over a year, before you actually do that first performance. So it has to be something that really matters to you and that really excites you. This is a commitment unlike any other, 2 months down the line, can't be bored with the project or the idea if you really dive into it. And what I love about the theater, it's live. Yes, it's a hard life. It's not quite a career in the way that you can't buy houses and stuff if you're working in the theater. But it is an incredibly fertile and collaborative space. Everyone they come there because they want to be there. It's not because it's just a job or just a paycheck. Everyone who works in the theater is incredibly committed. And I love that level of creative energy really does spur us forward. And it works as a collaborative. Theater is a very human medium. It's about people telling a story to other people, and I really enjoy that. So to be honest, I actually don't enjoy shows that much. If you told me, okay, you'll never do another show, but you'll be in rehearsal constantly. Yeah, I'm happy with that. For me, theater is about rehearsing and about finding who these people are in the story or in the text and just discovering their motivations and what. Because for me, on a very personal note, theater just seems to be a study of human beings and human behavior. And every time I've worked on a play and I've come out of it, I feel like I have gained a little bit as a human being. I've learned a little more. I think I'm a better human being because I now understand people better. Just a little bit. And that's what theater means to me.
How fantastic. So, Quasar, you've even spoken about collaborations, jo actually मैंने इसको इस तरीके से कभी देखा ही नहीं था, because my parents were also into theater, and as a child, I remember being in the darkroom space जहाँ पे, I think every time another actor took turns, so they carried me in their lap. And so theater has been a very integral part of my life also. So I kind of understand this entire space and how we get influenced with our parents very subconsciously, with our surroundings. But, पूरी दुनिया को पता है कि when you work with actors and creative team members, rehearsal process में बहुत सारे problems होते हैं because सबके बहुत mood swings होते हैं, issues होते हैं. So, Quasar, isko, how do you deal with that? And the whole world, they have this whole tag that they say that it isn't easy to work with people who are so passionately driven. So, when you're putting an entire production together, how do you deal with individual people? And has there been challenges? How have you approached it? Would be fantastic for our listeners who want to put a production together, because with the podcast medium, we have a lot of young people who listen to us and, they put together school and college productions. So would you share some tips?
It's a strange one. Working with people is always wonderful and always difficult, because people are people. We're all different kinds of people. We have different things. One of the things that I do enjoy about the theater, and at least on the teams that I've worked with, and I've been quite fortunate, is the fact that most of the time everyone is looking towards that production. That is the most important thing. The play is the thing. And then your little side egos and your little, issues or whatever, they all pale in the background, because at the end of the day, are we as a group able to deliver the best possible performance? And I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb, even when you're setting up to work on a show. There are bound to be clashes. There are bound to be, days. I mean, there was an actor I worked with who, for example, was very uncooperative at rehearsal, and it used to be quite tough. And then we discovered it's because he was on a new diet, so he was on a non-carb diet. So, his food was kind of bland, and, he was just irritable because, it was something that I was getting used to. So there we thought, oh, he doesn't like being in the play. He thinks too much of himself, all of that. But actually, we realized it's as something as simple as as that. And the thing about working in the theater is, if you're going to work in a show for 3 months or whatever, you are you pretty much know those people in and out for those 3 months. You know what's happening in their homes. It is fun. My father said this quite interestingly once. He said, I have 75 families. 72 of them are the groups of the plays that I have made, and three other, the rest. But that's a really interesting, and I must say, I agree with that completely, which is every time we work on a play, it is like a family. You know each other intimately, you know each other's good days, bad days, crabbity days. And as long as it's in the pursuit of making a piece of work, and trying to find what that piece of work is and do it to the best of the ability, it's fine. It starts becoming a little more problematic when it's about, other things, and it's no longer about the play per se. But that would be the rule of thumb for me, is just get everyone on board, be excited about what's happening.
My God, Quasar, this was so beautiful to hear that you become such an integral part, and they become such an integral part of your life, that you know what's going on in their lives. And this is so true, because I kind of never looked at it like this, because the people I work with, of course, they know what's happening in my life and I know what's happening in their lives. And, with this entire shift and change and, getting to meet friends lesser, I think our work friends really become family. But how do you balance this entire artistic vision, with budget constraints when you're creating a production?
Well, I mean, there's something called the dramatic purpose, right? Like, and anything we do, anything you ever do, you're trying to buy a piece of furniture for your house. There's a budget constraint. There's a size of the door problem. There are practicalities that you have to work out. You can't just walk in and say, oh, I wanna get a lazy boy, or I wanna get a couch. If your house has a narrow passage in the stairwell and the couch won't come in, So these are practicalities. So if you take that same logic and you apply it to the theater, whether we're looking at size of set dock or the size of budget, what can you afford? Those are the guardrails that you get put down, and that doesn't mean that you. In fact, I found that it actually sometimes allows us to be even more creative, in a way, rather than less creative. In fact, one of my simplest sets is for a play called A Peasant of El Salvador, which is really just 3 crates, a little bit of a crucifix, and some hanging wire, tangus. And that was because when we were building the show, we didn't really have very much. These crates happened to be lying around, these like mango crates. And we then came up with an entire grammar and a world, and these crates become people, they become tables, chairs, they become coffins, they become, pulpits, they become lecterns, it becomes everything. And if I didn't have the constraint, I would never have thought of it like that. And I think it actually has helped, me create that. So I think one of the things with regards to, from the creative aspect, with regards to the constraint, is to look at it like one of the other factors into which we are trying to, like, when you have a drawing, how beautifully you color it is up to you. But you can't go outside the lines of the drawing, and that's really the root. And finances is one of those things. Sometimes it's about number of actors you can have. Sometimes it's about time. Hey, this play is happening in 6 weeks' time. So then you can't imagine something too big or too massive or too whatever. You have to then contain everything to be a little smaller. But if you look at those as just the lines, and then in those lines, or the line drawing, and then in that line, how beautifully you color it, that's the effort. That's the magic. And I think that's the best way to kind of just rebrand the constraint, as it were.
You spend the entire money that you earn on theater. So how do you manage, your advertising career and theater performances,
I was in advertising for a very, very short span of time, a little more than a year. And when I was working in advertising, the idea was that whatever I make in my day job would then go into the theater. Unfortunately, time was not permitting that because I was turning up at rehearsal late. Advertising is quite a hard taskmaster, and it needs that commitment. And there are days when you don't go home because it's pitching season or whatever. But I'm very grateful for that time there, because now where we are at as a company, what we do is we use the skills of the theater. We do our own plays and we do stuff. But one of the ways that we fund the theater work we do is we use our skills of the theater for corporates, for product launches, for brand launches, for internal, events. Uh, uh, and that's so because we every stage needs a set design. Everything is an experience. People are kind of bored of PowerPoints, when you talk about product features and stuff. So we try and find inventive ways to tell that, whether it's through a musical, whether it's through, some kind of intervention theater piece or whatever. And I'm very glad for the advertising experience because it allows me to look at and create work from someone else's point of view, which is what advertising is all about. When you're a creative writer or whatever, you're trying to get into the head of the client to kind of deliver something that they want, which is very different to the art side of it, which is very different to the theater side of it, because I'm trying to say what I want, But I'm very glad for the training that I had, because it allows me then to think like someone else and think for someone else and develop work. And that's been the business model that we've been functioning through. We do a fair amount of corporate work, and then we take that money and we put it in the plays we want to do. Because, some of the plays we're doing are about farmer issues or about mental health or about the environment or, about Tibetan refugees or whatever we want to do. That's then up to us to tell those stories. While our corporate work is, to launch a car or, launch a new brand of beer or, stuff like that. And still the same rules apply. How do you tell those stories interestingly?
So directing versus acting, which one would you prefer, Quasar?
Oh, very much directing. I'm not an actor at all. In fact, when we formed as a company, at our first meeting, we had just done a play, and the play got invited to the NCPA, and it had done a fair amount of, it had created some kind of buzz, and I had played the lead. So I was kind of, cock a hoop and, like full of myself a little bit. And we sat down as a theater company, and our first meeting, the rest of the company turned to me and said, Q, we love you. We think you're a fine director, but please don't act. And I was like, what? But I've just done this show and, like whatever. And they then asked me a very simple question. They said, if you were two separate people, like Quasar the director and Quasar the actor, would Quasar the director cast Quasar the actor? And I really thought about it, and I went, yeah, probably not. Because it was a real wake-up call. I'm not an actor. I don't have that discipline. I don't have... there's a certain set of things that you need to be an actor. I enjoy acting, and there's no question about it, but I live for directing. I much prefer directing. So if you wake me up at 3 a.m. in the middle of the night and say, what are you? And I'll say, I'm a director. I'm a theater director. That's how I identify myself.
It's been so phenomenal to speak to you. But before I end, I need you to tell my listeners, who is Quasar? What are the kind of memories that, if you were right now talking to me, that you could look back into this entire love and passion that you have for theater and acting and being on stage, putting the entire production together, being so creatively inclined? What would be those moments in your life that you think was that turning point? I
mean, I don't know about turning points and whatever. I've been very lucky. I've got to work with some lovely people when I was starting out, with people like Rehan Engineer, and then I got to work internationally with someone like a Tim Supple, which was really fortunate. I've managed to travel around a little bit and work internationally and locally, and that's always lovely. What I love about the theater is the fact that every week is different. In fact, that's one of the problems I had when I had a corporate job was the fact that every week was the same. I was going to the same place, doing the same thing. With the theater, every week is completely different. So, for example, this week I'm, writing a song for someone, but next week I'll be in rehearsal with Every Brilliant Thing. And, the week after will be us planning a new production. So it just every week changes. I find that very exciting. There are 3 or 4 amazing moments. One where we were performing in Darpana in Ahmedabad at Natrani, and it's an open air venue, and it started pouring with rain. There were about 25 minutes left for the end of the show, and it started pouring with rain. And we switched off, the light rig and stuff because, whatever. And I was about to go on the stage to tell the audience we're really sorry, we're going to stop the show and whatever because of the rain. But the audience didn't move. They just sat there in the open air in the rain. Some of them put up umbrellas, the others just sat there. They were so engrossed with the show. And then we had to really think, dude, if the audience is not worried about the rain, how can we be worried about the rain? And we performed those the rest of the show, and we went on. And it was an amazing half an hour. It was really quite beautiful. And almost serendipitously, as soon as the last line was said, like the rain stopped. And years later, I met someone who was at that show, and he's like, "Haan sir, banta tha." It's like, it was such a lovely evening that this extra element really needed to happen. So that was an amazing thing. There's another show that we performed in Dharamsala, a play called So Many Socks. And there's a sequence in there where these youngsters, college students who are in the play, they put up the Tibetan flag. And a lot of the audience were the Tibetan community. And there's this old gentleman who stood up at that point and started applauding. And there's still, 15 minutes of the show to go. I don't know, those last 15 minutes after that man started applauding is not the play I directed. I don't know what it was. It was the most magical commune between actors and audience. Like, the audience willed the show on, and the actors took that and went with it. And it was just magical. I've never been in an environment. I'm very fortunate to have been in an environment that was that fertile, that energetic. There was literally like electricity flowing through, this actor audience kind of thing. They were willing the show on, and the actors were responding to that. So there've been a few things like this that have been really quite magical. Our show, Every Brilliant Thing that we do, we often have occasions when audience members are coming up after and stuff, because the show is about suicide and about mental health, and how to look for the joyful things in life. And people come up and they share, and we are just so fortunate to be part of that, just to be witness to it. I love being in the theater. I recommend it wholeheartedly, not just as an exercise or like people constantly say, do the theater, it makes your diction better, you'll get self-confidence, you'll do this, you'll that. Yes, all of that is there, but that's all ancillary. I do believe the theater makes you a better human being. It makes you work together with people and makes you understand people better. And it tells us a little more about the nuance in the world. It helps us see the different patterns and the different kinds of things. And if there's one thing we desperately need more of, it's nuance. We need to understand what our fellow man is saying and actually give them the benefit of doubt and be generous and receive that and appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't change this for anything.
Thank you, Quasar, for being on today's episode. It's been fantastic talking to you. Wish you all the best with all the upcoming productions. And I know that you're in love with theatre. And this is going to be such an amazing episode for any of our listeners who are wanting to start their own production or are frightened to sink their teeth in wholeheartedly into theatre. This episode will really help them decide better. So thank you for being on today's show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. All the best with this. Anyone out there who wants to join the theatre, just do it, man.
To you, our dearest listeners, you can find us on your favorite streaming services, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and of course on all other major streaming services. With loads of love, we are The Mohua Show, where we talk imandari se.